The death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. The death of Jesus Christ, the execution of the Messiah, the murder of the Creator, is at once dreadful and awe-inspiring. It was not a random tragedy, but a divine appointment, foretold long before it happened and carefully orchestrated by God the Father. His death was not a surprise in heaven, it was part of a divine blueprint. The prophets spoke of it in Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53, and Jesus himself foretold the manner of his death in John 3:14. The Old Testament prophets pondered it in silence. The New Testament apostles brooded over it with reverence. The angels in heaven looked on in wonder and amazement. Jesus died for the whole world. Jesus died for the elect. Jesus died for every single human being. The sequence of events leading to the cross. 1. The last Passover. Jesus ate the Passover meal with his disciples. Matthew 26:17-25, fulfilling the shadow of the lamb slain in Egypt. 2. A lesson in humility. He rebuked the selfish ambition of his disciples who argued about greatness. Mark 9:33-35, then taught them by example. 3. Washing of feet. The king knelt like a servant and washed their feet, teaching them the true meaning of servant leadership. John 13:12-15. 4. The betrayer identified. Jesus exposed Judas Iscariot as the one who would betray him. Matthew 26:21-25. 5. Judas departs. While Judas left into the night, the rest remained with Jesus. John 13:30-38. 6. The Lord's Supper instituted. Jesus established the sacred ordinance of communion. Matthew 26:26-29. 7. A word of comfort. Jesus comforted the remaining 11 with a promise of heaven and his return. John 14:1-3. The arrest and illegal trials of Jesus. And before Annas, held secretly at night, Jesus was bound like a criminal. John 18:12-24. 2. Before Caiaphas, false witnesses lied. Peter denied him 3 times. Matthew 26:57-75. 3. Before the Sanhedrin, he affirmed he was the Son of God, accused of blasphemy. Matthew 27:1-10. 4. Before Pilate, accused of insurrection and tax evasion, but found innocent. Matthew 27:11-14. 5. Before Herod, he remained silent. Herod mocked him and sent him back. Luke 23:8-12. 6. Final trial before Pilate. The people chose Barabbas, a criminal, over Jesus, the Lord of glory. Matthew 27:15-26. The crucifixion. Jesus was nailed to the cross between 2 criminals. A crowd of rulers, priests, soldiers, scoffers, and a repentant thief witnessed the scene. Matthew 27:41-44. The 7 sayings of Jesus on the cross. 1. A word of forgiveness. Father, forgive them. Luke 23:34. 2. A word of assurance. Today you will be with me in paradise. Luke 23:43. 3. A word of comfort. Woman, behold your son. John 19:26. 4. A word of desolation. My God, why have you forsaken me? Matthew 27:46. 5. A word of suffering. I thirst. John 19:28. 6. A word of triumph. It is finished. John 19:30. 7. A word of committal. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Luke 23:46. These words were spoken 3 times before the darkness fell. Once during the 3 hours of darkness, and 3 times after the darkness lifted. The superscription on the cross, written in Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, so that the whole world could read. 1. This is the King of the Jews. Luke 23:38. 2. The King of the Jews. Mark 15:26. 3. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Matthew 27:37. 4. Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. John 19:19. The meaning of his death. Jesus' death was substitutional. He took the place of sinners and bore the full weight of divine justice. It satisfied God's holy requirement and opened the door for forgiveness, justification, and sanctification. In Eden, God and Adam walked face to face. Sin turned man away from God, but at Calvary, Jesus made it possible for God to face man again. Now it's up to man to turn and face God. Romans 3:10-20. Victory over Hades and the fallen angels. After his death, Jesus descended into Hades and liberated the righteous dead so they could enter heaven. He also declared judgment upon the rebellious angels. 1 Peter 3:18-20. Through his death we receive life. The death of Jesus brought redemption to sinners. Galatians 3:13. Sanctification for believers. Hebrews 10:10. Destruction of Satan's power. Colossians 2:15. The resurrection of Jesus Christ. The resurrection is the foundation of the Christian faith. Every other religious founder died and remains in the grave. But Jesus rose again, bodily and physically, from the dead. John 20:14-18. Predicted by David, Psalm 16:10. Foretold by Isaiah, Isaiah 53:9-12. Prophesied by Jesus himself, Matthew 12:38-40. Remembered by his enemies, Matthew 27:62-64. Forgotten by his followers, Mark 16:1-3. The true sign of Christianity is not the cross, but the resurrection. Proofs of the resurrection, 1 Corinthians 15. An empty tomb. Silence from Roman and Jewish leaders. The shift from Sabbath to Sunday worship. The birth and persistence of the church. If Christ did not rise, preaching is in vain. Faith is empty, and preachers are liars. Sins are unforgiven. The dead are lost. Life itself is meaningless. 1 Corinthians 15:1-45. But Christ did rise with a glorified body. Matthew 28:5-8. Death has been defeated once and for all. Post-resurrection appearances of Jesus. Jesus appeared on multiple occasions. Mary Magdalene, John 20:11-18. Women returning from the tomb, Matthew 28:9-10. Peter, Luke 24:34. Two disciples on the road to Emmaus, Mark 16:12-13. The apostles, Luke 24:36-43. 11 disciples a week later, John 20:26-29. 7 disciples by the Sea of Galilee, John 21:1-23. Over 500 disciples at once, 1 Corinthians 15:6. James, his earthly brother, 1 Corinthians 15:7. The 11 on Mount Galilee, Matthew 28:16-20. The disciples at the Mount of Ascension, Acts 1:3-9. And even during martyrdom, Acts 7:55-56. Paul on the road to Damascus, Acts 9:3-6. Paul in Arabia, Galatians 1:12-17. But Paul in the temple, Acts 22:7-21. Paul in Caesarea prison, Acts 23:11. John on the island of Patmos, Revelation 1:12-20. The nature of Christ's resurrected body. It had flesh and bone, Luke 24:39-40. He could eat and drink, Luke 24:41-43. It bore the marks of crucifixion, John 20:27. It was not limited by natural laws, John 20:19. It was a glorified, superior body, like wheat to grain, beard's man to beast. Heaven to earth, sun to moon, 1 Corinthians 15:35-41, John 12:24. Consequences of his resurrection. To believers, justification is guaranteed, Romans 4:25. Power for victorious living is assured, Ephesians 1:18-2:10. Our labor is not in vain, 1 Corinthians 15:58. Our own resurrection is certain, 2 Corinthians 4:14, to Jesus Christ. It proves his divine nature, Romans 1:4. It justifies his exaltation, Acts 5:30-31. It affirms him as head of the church, Ephesians 1:19-23. To the sinner, it is a warning of judgment if he refuses to repent, Acts 17:31. To the devil, it marks his eternal defeat, Revelation 20:10. To the Sabbath, it signifies the transition from Saturday to Sunday as the day of worship, Acts 27. The death and resurrection of Jesus Christ are not just historical facts. They are divine interventions with eternal implications. They are the heart of the gospel and the hope of the world.